Well, hey there, Ridge Church. So glad that you're joining us for yet another edition of Church at Home. This is a little bit strange that this is continuing, but we know that eventually this will end. But right now, I just got to be honest with you. Maybe like you, I'm ready for this to be over. I'm ready to be with my church family. I'm ready to. And I'm an introvert. But I'm actually ready to shake your hand, to hug your neck, to just see some people. I know you're feeling that way. And here's the thing, it just looks like it that it's not quite over. We've got some time left, and I don't know where you're getting your news from, or if you're more of a Facebook news person, or you're more of a watch TV news person. But it looks like this hasn't quite peaked yet. Even here in Alabama this week, we got news that all businesses had to shut down. So all non-essential businesses are shut down. We're hearing more stories of people losing their jobs, and people are still trying to scramble. Parents are trying to figure out how to homeschool their kids, and it just continues to be such a difficult adjustment for us. And it looks like as the cases of COVID-19 continue to rise, that we've still got some time left ahead of us. And whether that's just a few weeks or even a few months, we don't know what this is going to look like or how it's going to turn out. But there are a lot of unknowns. But there is something that I do know, and it's that we are going to get to the other side of this. Everybody understands that. At some point, we're going to get to the other side of this, and there's going to be a new normal. Life is not going to look the same probably ever again. But we're going to be able to look back at some point, and depending on our perspective, we're going to see how God was at work through this. We're going to see how things began to turn out, how little stories and little decisions that God began to use those to tell a bigger story, that we're going to see something very unique and beautiful, and everybody's going to have a different story to tell. But just like anything that we go through in our lives, we're going to get to the other side of this, and we're going to look back, and we're going to see all along what God was really up to, because that's what he does. He is a master artist, and he takes all the little broken pieces of glass and he puts them together in such a unique way that it creates this beautiful picture. And you've experienced that in your life. I've experienced that in mine, or you've seen it in somebody else's life, but that's what God does. And it's really why we called this series Stained Glass Stories, because God is a stained glass window maker, and he takes the stories of our lives and he creates these incredible pictures. And so I just want to encourage you with that as we get started today. We've been looking at some different stories over the last couple of weeks that tell these unique stories. But there are some of you, and here's the thing, I understand this, and everybody's personality is a little bit different, but some of you are a little skeptical from even thinking that way. You know, is it really that way? I mean, do we really have to go through something in order to look back? And that's just kind of you kind of imposing your idea of God onto difficult circumstances. Here's the thing. I get that. I totally get that. But here's the thing. We're all to some degree a questioner. I'm a questioner kind of by nature. I want to understand things better. I want to figure things out. And so I ask questions. I was the kid that would take apart my watch, and try to figure out how all the parts, what I wanted to see all the little parts and the mechanisms and how they work together. And then, of course, this was long before YouTube, and so I could never figure out how to actually get it back together. And it would usually never work again. But I just wanted to see. I just wanted to understand, and I wanted to know more. And of course, like many of you, that questioning has kind of spilled over into the realm of my faith and my understanding of who God is. And it's caused me to not necessarily question in the form of doubt, but I just wondered, I wonder what God really is like. I wonder why he does the things that he does. What is he really up to? I just want to know, what's he really thinking? Does God think? These are some of the thoughts that I have. And I sometimes think, if I could just see some things. You ever felt this way? If I could just see God do something amazing. God, if you would just do this really incredible, amazing thing, then I would understand you better, and I'd have bigger faith, and I would know things. And maybe you've thought that before. But then I get down that train of thought. And for some of you, you need to actually get there, I think. But I get down that train of thought, and I realize, what does God actually think when what would be his response if I were to say that. God, if you would just do something and show yourself in some kind of crazy way, I think God would say something like, well, what exactly do you want me to do? What is it you're wanting me to do? Something amazing and wonderful. Okay, so I've got an idea. What if, if this is God talking to us, and he's like, what if I took some dirt and I turned it into a living being? Would that do it? Would that be enough? Would that answer your questions? What if I took that and I took some dirt and I made an entire race of human beings, and ones that were capable of rational thought and could figure things out and could grow and adapt and think incredible things and be creative, and they were kind of created in my image. And what if I even gave them, these beings, the ability to reproduce themselves by growing little humans inside of themselves? What if I did that? Would that do it? Oh, and then I'll take it a step further, and I'll put some lungs inside these uniquely crafted individuals, these little beings that are all different. They all have different DNA. And in these lungs, they'll have the ability to breathe about 23,000 times a day. What do you think about that? That would be cool. And then I would do something more. I would put a stomach in there. And the stomach would have the ability to so quickly to take the inner lining and to kind of reproduce itself so quickly that the acid inside the stomach, that's capable of melting metal, by the way, would not harm the rest of the body because of the way this stomach is developed. What if I did that? And then I put a heart in there, and the heart would beat 100,000 times a day, pumping 2,000 gallons of blood all throughout the body every day. That would be pretty. And then the eyes, I would put 2 eyes in the front of the head. And what if I did this? And each of those eyes would be, the equivalent of a 576 megapixel digital camera. That would be neat. And would have the ability, each of those eyes would have the ability to differentiate between 10,000 different hues of colors. And then all of that would be tied together and connected to and controlled by this brain, okay? I'll put a brain up in the head, and everything will be connected there. And it's like a supercomputer. As a matter of fact, the electric impulses, the number of electric impulses that the brain produces every day will exceed every electric impulse produced by every single phone across the world, all at one time combined. It'll be amazing. What if I did that? And matter of fact, to make it even crazier, all of this will happen involuntarily behind the scenes without even any conscious effort. What if I did that? Oh, I already did. I already did that. And of course, we hear that and we think, no. That's not what I'm talking about. We want you to do something really amazing and spectacular, like a miracle or something. Isn't that what we think? It's like, no. Here's why I say all this. Because I think what I have come to believe as a questioner, as somebody who's always wondering and thinking these kind of thoughts, I believe that we're actually so close to God. I believe that God is actually so present, so close, so involved in our everyday lives that we just tend to miss it. Is it possible that we actually miss what God is already doing and what he has already done and what he has already accomplished because he's actually just so close? Because there's so many miracles all around us all the time that we've kind of taken them for granted. Is it possible that we have missed what God is up to because he's actually so present with us? Well, there's a story that I want us to look at today. And it's included in the Gospel of John. We've really been in the Gospel of John each week. We kind of started all of our stories there. John the Baptist the first week. We talked about a man named Nicodemus last week. And we said that he was a part of a group of religious leaders during the day called the Pharisees. These were guys who kind of, they had it all together. These were very respected. We talked about this some last week, but there was also this small group of Pharisees, Nicodemus being one of them, who had some different thoughts about who Jesus was. They were willing to consider that maybe Jesus really was the Messiah, that he was who he said he was. But then there was the vast majority of Pharisees didn't agree with that, and they just knew that Jesus was a problem. This was something that needed to be solved. They just wanted him gone. They thought he was a liar, that he was teaching the wrong things, and that he was a heretic, and he needed to be done away with. So there was that tension. And in John chapter 9, what's interesting is John, the gospel writer here, dedicates an entire chapter to a man who he doesn't even name. An entire chapter to a blind beggar, because it illustrates, one of the reasons is because it illustrates this very tension that existed between Jesus and the Pharisees. And it kind of spells out some of the reasons that the Pharisees didn't really like him. And so I just want to jump into the story. If you have a Bible, I just suggest that you jump in with us, follow along with us. Otherwise, it'll be on your screen. And so here's where John picks up the story. He says, so as Jesus went along, he saw a man who was blind from birth. Okay, so this wasn't something that happened later in life. He had been blind all his life. His disciples asked him, Rabbi, who sinned? This man or his parents, that he was born blind? You see, it was in the first century, it was their understanding that there was this cause and effect relationship between specific sin and specific suffering. So pain and suffering was connected to something that had happened in the past, even generational sin, like something that showed up, in this case, blindness from birth in this man. They just believed, well, obviously something had happened specifically that caused this blindness. And so the disciples just wanted to know what happened. Who was it? Who sinned? Well, Jesus' immediate response is, well, neither. That's not the case. I need to shift your paradigm, your way of thinking. You're thinking about this wrong. It's neither this man nor his parents who have sinned. That's not the issue. Instead, he goes on to say, but this happened, and this is one of those things that's so awkward, and you would think I was such a jerk if this was like what I said to you, but I don't mind reading it because it's what Jesus said. So, Jesus said it, so don't blame me. This happened, this man's blindness from birth happened, not because of sin, but so that the works of God might be displayed in him. That just, it's not a real comfortable thing to say. But here's, Jesus is essentially creating a category where things that happen in our lives can actually serve a purpose, even things that are negative, even our negative circumstances, even our pain, even our suffering, that there is a category of pain and suffering that actually can serve divine purpose. In other words, pain can have a purpose. That's essentially what Jesus is saying. Pain can have a purpose, a divine purpose. In other words, think about it this way. Jesus, in his pain and suffering, served a divine purpose. Apparently this man and the things that had happened to him was going to serve a divine purpose according to Jesus. And who knows? Let's bring it into our context. What if? Is it possible? According to Jesus, it is. Is it possible that this global pandemic, COVID-19, could it have a divine purpose in our lives, in individual lives, families' lives, in the church's life as a whole, as the local church, as the whole church, just even on a global scale? Could it be? Well, according to Jesus, yeah, it's a possibility. But of course, we don't really like that. There's plenty of us that think, that's the reason that I've turned Christianity off for me. I walked away because I just don't like that. I'm not comfortable with that. It doesn't make sense to me that a God would do that. But think about it. Think with me for just a second if you're skeptical, because I get that. I'm the questioner. But isn't it true? I would say all of us, but let's just start with most of us, have been through something and we've experienced pain and suffering. We've walked through a difficult season of life. We've gone through something where we get to the other side, or at least we've seen it in somebody else's life, where we get to the other side and we look back and we think, you know what? I see what God did there. I didn't see it when I was in it because it was horrible and it was miserable and I couldn't see how any good, but I just know I'm a different person now. I grew as a result of it. My faith was strengthened as a result of what happened. Something is different in me and I praise God for it now. And we see that and we see it happen in other people's lives. and we talk about it, we're just not comfortable saying it. Of course, we would never say that to somebody. We'd never say, well, you're just, in the midst of this terrible circumstance because God has a divine purpose. I mean, that's not what you communicate to somebody. But it is true, if we're being honest, that God often displays his power on the platform of our pain. And so then Jesus, after saying this, he kind of shifts gears a little bit. And he says, and it seems a little strange, his disciples surely were a little confused, but they had grown accustomed to this. As long as it is day, Jesus says, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. While I am in the world, I am the light of the world. Essentially, Jesus is saying, look, now is the time for you to get a good look at me. There is never going to be a time where who I am and my identity is more apparent than it is right now. I'm the light of the world. I am the bright light of the world, but I'm going to be leaving. And at that point, the world is going to be very dark. So take it, I think Jesus is saying, take advantage of the opportunity you have while you can see me and all that I'm doing to trust me. While you can see me, there will be no better time in history, guys, talking to his disciples, when God's glory and my identity and who I am is more evident and more apparent than it is right now. Because I'm here. Watch what I'm doing. Trust me. Watch the things that I'm doing. I know you don't have it all figured out, but just trust me. Well, after saying this, he kind of goes back to the guy. And here's what's interesting. John didn't give us a whole lot of detail. He just gives us the weird ones. He says, so Jesus spit on the ground, made some mud with the saliva, and put it on the man's eyes. Okay, that's gross. And it's unusual because there was no apparent interaction. They just walk up. I mean, Jesus was just talking with his disciples. He walks up, spits on the ground, grabs it, makes a little mud, and just starts wiping it on this guy's eyes. And I feel like, the guy's like, oh, what's happening here? Who is this? Why are you wiping stuff on my eyes? But apparently Jesus, was taking this opportunity, not just to teach his disciples, but to communicate something to the world around him and to you and me today. So then he does this weird little ritual, which he didn't always have to. I mean, clearly he had healed other people without, spit and dirt and mud. But then he does something even stranger. He just says, go. He just sends him off. Go. Wash in the pool of Siloam. And so the man went and he washed. And then he went home seeing. But it wasn't until he went and washed. And so what does that tell us? Well, he never actually saw Jesus. He just heard his voice. Matter of fact, this is what I want us to see. Matter of fact, this man had very little information. Apparently, from further context as we read on, you're going to see he didn't really know who Jesus was. He wasn't even sure if he believed everything about Jesus. He thought that maybe, he had heard some things and he'd done some things. And so maybe, I don't know, some people are saying he's a prophet or the Messiah. Like, I don't know. I don't really know. But he took what little information he had and he trusted it. He didn't understand everything. He didn't ask all the right questions. He didn't have everything figured out. He wasn't questioning. He just said, based on some of these rumors, I'm just going to go with it. I'm just going to trust based on what I've got. Continues. His neighbors and those, because he had gone back home and now he could see, and so this was an interesting thing for everybody. His neighbors and those who had formerly seen him begging, I mean, this guy had been around a while. Isn't this the same man who used to sit and beg? And it's like, really? You have to ask that? I mean, I know he was a blind beggar. And so essentially that just meant that people typically avoided him because like if I don't avoid him, then I might feel, like I need to give him some money or some food. And so most people just ignored him. It's like, well, I don't even know if this is the same guy because it can't be. You can see. Is this the same guy? Of course, some claimed, that he was. Others said no. Of course, I mean, this is what happens in our culture. Others say, no, he only looks like him. It can't be. But the guy, the formerly blind man, insisted, I'm that guy. I am the man. Of course, then everybody asked the question that you and I want to know. Well, then how did it happen? How in the world were your eyes opened, they asked. They just want to know what you and I want to know. They want to ask the questions. Hold on a second. Could you take the watch apart? I want to see how it works. I don't want to just trust that it ticks and that it's just this kind of magical thing. I mean, I want to know how it works. Phones and watches, it's like, I don't know how this works, and Wi-Fi and radio signals and all. Like, I don't know how information passes through things. I don't know how this image is getting up here. I just know wires get plugged in. But could you explain it to me? Of course, they're really asking the wrong question. This is what we find out. And so he tries to answer their question. He says, well, the man they call Jesus, like, I don't really know him, but the guy, y'all have heard about him too. The man they call Jesus, he made some mud and he put it on my eyes, and then he told me to go to Siloam and wash. And so I went and I washed, and then I could see. I don't know. I mean, that was as much detail as he gives, because it's what happened. He didn't even try to explain it away because it didn't make sense to him either, but he knew what had happened to him. And of course, the people wanted to know, well, then where is this man? And this guy's thinking, I was blind. Did you hear the story? Like, I don't know. He sent me away blind before I could do anything, before I could see, and I had to go wash. And so I had to go travel to the southern part of Jerusalem in order to get to that pool. He was gone. And I went home like, I don't know. Genius. I don't know where he went. And so, of course, they did what you do, what was tradition and what was taught, that anytime a miracle happened or somebody was healed or somebody was, once kind of outside the community, could be brought back in, you would take them to religious leaders at the time. In this case, it would have been the Pharisees. And you would take them to them so that they could kind of investigate and figure things out, because this was amazing and you wanted other people to know. And so they brought this man to the Pharisees, the man who had been blind. Now, I love this little interjection. Now, the day on which Jesus had made the mud and opened the man's eyes, so he did two things. He made mud and opened the man's eyes. Well, it was on the Sabbath. Come on, Jesus. Why always the Sabbath? And of course, I immediately think, this man's been blind all his life. Couldn't he wait one more day? I mean, can you not just wait until the beginning of next week? Why not like Wednesday? Why does it have to be the Sabbath, Jesus? I mean, don't you know that's going to cause trouble? And of course, I'm thinking, well, yeah, I mean, maybe that's precisely why. And I think that's John's point here. It happened to be on the Sabbath. And making mud or mixing something or kneading anything like K-N-E-A-D, like that kind of kneading, and healing somebody or administering medicine to somebody who's sick but not, it doesn't look like they're going to die anytime soon. It's not a life-threatening situation. That violates the Sabbath, at least according to the oral law and oral tradition, but not according to the written law, the Torah, the law of Moses. And so it just happens to be that it was on the Sabbath. And so the Pharisees also asked him how he had received his sight. They wanted to know. It wasn't necessarily who did it at first. They just wanted to know how. How in the world? Are you sure? Very skeptical, of course, just like we are. How he had received his sight. And the guy just explains again, very simply. Well, he put mud on my eyes. The man replied, and I washed. Now I see. I mean, that's just, I don't know. It was as simple as that. Well, some of the Pharisees, of course said, well, this man is not from God. They start arguing, they've kind of, the man, he's like, they've kind of, hey, step out of the room for just a minute. And there's these there's these two factions within this larger group of Pharisees. And some think, well, clearly he's not a man from God, for he does not keep the Sabbath, which is, technically not the case, because he wasn't breaking the written Torah by any means. But then others ask, perhaps people like Nicodemus, how can a sinner perform such signs? It's like, wait a minute, there's something to consider here. Wait a minute, this guy was blind, and there's all these witnesses, and he's even saying that he was blind, like since birth, and now he's not. So, I mean, if he wasn't, somebody who was from God and he was a sinner, well, then how could he perform such signs? And so there was division among them. So they bring the guy back in, and they turn to the blind man. Wait a minute, what have you to say about him? This guy Jesus. Some think he's a sinner. Others think, well, how could that be? He's performing these signs. What do you say? It was your eyes he opened. And the man replied, well, I don't know, maybe a prophet. He's a prophet? Of course, they still didn't believe him. They weren't buying it, that he had been blind. Maybe even that he was just lying about being blind at all. Of course, they didn't know who he was. They didn't spend any time with this guy. And that he had received his sight. And so they ended up bringing his parents in. It's like, oh, well, here's how we'll figure it out. We'll just bring his parents in. Is this your son? They asked. Is this the one you say was born blind? How is it that he can now see? I wanted to know. Well, so they asked his parents, and they're a little nervous. Why are we getting called in? We're going to have to answer some things, and they're worried about getting kicked out of the synagogue, as we see in a minute. Excommunicated, we might say. Is this your son? And listen to how they answer. Well, we know he's our son. That's good. They knew he was their son. And we know he was born blind. Well, because we're his parents. We were there. I remember. Yep, he was born blind. He is our son. But, as far as how he can see now or who opened his eyes, no clue. We know that he's our son. We know he was born blind. Don't know how it happened, though. We don't understand. Matter of fact, they kind of then defer because they're nervous. They say, ask him. He is of age. He's old enough to speak for himself. His parents said this because they were afraid of what the Jewish leaders would do. They were afraid of the Jewish leaders. Why? Because they had already, watch this, they had already decided who Jesus was or wasn't. They had pre-decided. And so they were nervous because they knew they couldn't give the wrong answer because of what was going to happen. This really wasn't up for question. They had made up their minds because they had already decided that anyone who acknowledged that Jesus was the Messiah would be put out of the synagogue, and so they were nervous. And I think this is where we often find ourselves. You see, this idea is what we might call willful blindness. In other words, we kind of have our presuppositions. We understand some things. It's called confirmation bias. In other words, we believe something, and therefore it doesn't matter what information comes in. We're going to have to figure out how it fits into what we already believe. In other words, kind of has to fit into our box and understanding, or we're just not going to buy it. And of course, we always kind of pass a little judgment on the Pharisees for being, this way. It's like, are you kidding me? You had Jesus with you. Why in the world? You watch these crazy things happen. Why not just buy it? Like, why do you push back? But before we judge, let me ask you this. How often are we blinded by our own presuppositions? How often do we find ourselves with the things that we're taught and the things that we believe, whether you're a Christian or a non-Christian? This can happen. This isn't just a religious thing. This is for any of us. How often are we blinded by our own assumptions about what is true or what is not? It's like the Pharisees. We've already decided what we believe about something. And so therefore, we don't want to look this way. We don't want to see something even when there's something to see. We don't want to look at what's right in front of us because we've already decided what we believe. And so some of us are thinking, I don't believe in the supernatural. Therefore, when I read about something that says something about the supernatural, I automatically throw it out because I presuppose that there is no supernatural. And this isn't just a religious thing. This is really the posture oftentimes of those who don't believe. Think about this. If you're not a Christian, unbelief often is stubborn and willful. Just not believing. I've just decided. I'm set in my ways. This is my context, and I've walked away. I've pushed away. Don't even talk to me about that. Don't tell me something that might be contrary to what I already believe. I too have my box, and anything that is outside of that box, I've just chosen to already throw it away. So I don't even want to look in the direction of something, even though there's something to see, if it might take me out of my context. Don't try to change my mind. And that's where the Pharisees were. And I think that's where oftentimes we are as well. A second time they summoned the man who had been blind. Come on back in. This time they threatened him. Give glory to God by telling the truth. We know this man is a sinner. In other words, you better tell us what we want to hear or else we're going to throw you out. And you don't want that. Well, he replied, whether he's a sinner or not, I don't know. I'm not real sure. I don't have all of the information. There are some things that I don't understand. I just know what I experienced. See, I think he's saying something like this. I think he's saying, I don't have to know everything to know something. I don't have to know everything to know something. I just know what I've experienced. I just know something happened. And I can't really answer all your questions, and I can't really say as to, who this Jesus really is, or whether or not what, the rumors going around, or what people are saying about him. I don't really know. I just know something. I don't know much. I just know something. And I'm willing to trust in that because I experienced it. I walked through it. And I'm not telling you got to believe me. I'm just telling you. And I think this is true for every single one of us. This isn't just this man. This is for all of us we need to hear today. You do not have to understand everything before you can believe something. You don't have to understand everything. Matter of fact, you won't ever understand everything before you can believe something. Matter of fact, it's oftentimes only in this arena, in the realm of the supernatural, the spiritual, that we apply this idea. That we think, well, I just have to get all my questions answered. I'm not buying it. It just doesn't make sense. But there are other things in our lives that we absolutely trust in and believe in, but have no ability to really explain. I mean, think about it. I mean, you believe in love, and you do not know how to fully explain it. You believe in human consciousness, but you can't explain it. You believe in the fact that there's energy all around us, but you can't explain it. There are things in our lives that you believe without fully understanding it, because you don't have to fully understand something before you can start believing something. And the same is true of a relationship with Jesus. So the man just says, I'm not real sure as to the question you asked me, but there is one thing I do know. I was blind, but now I see. Couldn't see, and then this guy walked up and did something, and now I see. I can't explain it. I'm not real sure who Jesus is. I don't, is he a prophet? Is he the Messiah? Is he some magical crazy man from the future? I don't know. Was there something in that mud? Was there something magical in his spit? I don't know. I don't know if it was the mud. I don't know if it was, the going to the pool and washing. I don't know. I cannot explain it. Ask me all the questions you want. I just know one thing. I can see now, and I couldn't before. And that's different. And that's amazing. I experienced something. And see, I think this is potentially true for every single one of us. We can all walk through something. We can all go through a season of life that we don't understand. But if we're honest with ourselves and we're paying attention, oftentimes we can know and trust that God actually is at work, maybe because we just can't see it because he's so close. He's actually so involved. What if God is so involved in what's going on right now in our world that we just can't actually see it? It's like, I'm just so used to these things happening. I'm so used to breathing in and breathing out, my heart constantly beating, and me waking up in the mornings and being able to go to bed at night. I'm just so used to that I don't even see the miracle anymore. I don't even see God in it. And yet there are many of you, and here's the thing, this is the story. I mean, just like this man here, this is our story. This is the story of millions of Christians all around the world. We just know at some point, we can't explain it, but at some point in our lives, we were going through a difficult time or a very hard season of our lives. We were struggling with something. We were at the end of our rope, the end of ourselves. We had run into a wall. Something happened. And all of a sudden, we just, whatever it looked like for you, you hit your knees, you cried out to God, you yelled, you prayed. Something happened and something changed inside of you. and you can't explain it, and you don't. And for some of you, it was gradual. For others of you, it was immediate, and you're not real sure why, or and I've still got questions about the Jesus thing and the Bible thing and the church thing, and there's some stuff that I still push back against, and there are gaps in the story, and I know it doesn't make sense, but you just know, doggone it, something happened. That's all I know. Something happened, and it changed me. That's my story. It's why I can still be a questioner and not get all my questions answered, because I just know at the end of the day, even when I've got my questions and my presuppositions, I just know I'm different now. That I've been saved from myself and my own negativity, my own thought life, my own sinful nature. Like, I'm saved from that because I'm different. Something's different in me. And it's available. And I can't explain it, and I can't tell you exactly what it should look like for you. I just know it's different for me. And if you're not a Christian, if you're not a believer, let me just ask you, when was the last time you really took a look? When was the last time you really looked around and you were honest with yourself and you said, let me just put aside, let me break open some of the walls of my kind of presuppositions and the box that I've kind of got for God. Because even if you're not a Christian, you kind of got your God box, right? You've got your idea of what all of this, is supposed to be like. And so if anything doesn't fit into that, then you just throw it out. But when was the last time you really looked? When was the last time, has it been lately? When you really investigated, when was the last time you thought that maybe I'm willing to test it out again. I'm willing to consider, hey, is there really a God out there somewhere? Could it really be? Is it possible that there really was a Jesus and that maybe he really did die and was resurrected 2,000 years ago? I don't know. It's a possibility. I can't explain it and I don't know. But could it be that there is willful unbelief? It just doesn't jive for me, and so I don't want to think about it. And here's the thing, I just want to challenge you today to reconsider, to think about it again. Could it be? You don't have to know everything before you can believe something. And the same is true for a relationship with Jesus. You're not going to get all your questions answered. You're not going to have it all figured out. You're going to want to open up the watch and see what's inside and see if you can't figure out how everything works together and all the pieces. And you're going to question COVID-19 and all of the things that are happening right now. And why is there pain and suffering in the world if there's a good God? And you're going to have all those questions. But you can still believe because of something that you do know, not because of what you don't know. And who knows, something may happen for you as well. And it may just change you. And I can't explain it, and I don't know what it's going to take for you. But I know it's available. But here, even though it's just a tiny bit of something that you're willing to believe, that's enough. And you can take a step of faith. You can take a tiny step of faith toward Jesus with just a little bit of understanding. Heavenly Father, wherever people are today, physically, geographically, spiritually, God, I pray that you would open up our eyes, even if it's just a little bit, to hear something new today. To know what to do with this, to be okay with, hey, I've got questions, I'm a questioner, I want to figure things out, but just knowing at the end of the day, can't explain it. And God, would you cause something to happen in us that changes us forever? That so convinces us that no matter what floats our way, we're so convinced because, hey, I experienced it, and something happened in me. God, I pray that Christians would get that and that we would live for that. In Jesus' name. And then if you would, just right where you are, I just ask that you would keep your eyes closed for just a minute, wherever you are. If you would just kind of humor me for just a second, hang on with me. If you're not a Christian, I just want to invite you to take a little step today. You don't have to buy the whole package. I mean, this isn't about, well, do I believe, that there was really a great, global flood and that Jonah really was swallowed by a whale. I'm not asking you to bite into all that today. I'm just asking you, are you willing to take what you do know and to take a step of faith in his direction? If so, would you just pray with me right where you are? Heavenly Father, I want to trust you today. I'm going to take this little step, and I want to see if something will happen in me. I'm a sinner, and I need a Savior, and I believe that is Jesus. So I put my trust in you. I give you my life, and I ask you to change me from the inside out. In Jesus' name, amen.